In the spring of 1924, a man dying of tuberculosis gave his best friend a simple instruction. Everything I leave behind, in the way of notebooks, manuscripts, letters, is to be burned unread and to the last page. That man was Franz Kafka. He was 40 years old. He had published almost nothing in his lifetime. He died believing his work had failed. A century later, his name has become an adjective, Kafkaesque, a word for nightmares we recognize but can't escape. His face appears on coffee mugs in Prague. His books have been translated into every major language on earth. How does a man who wanted to disappear become impossible to forget? Here's the version most people know. Franz Kafka, a tortured genius consumed by existential dread, writing nightmares in a garret while Prague crumbled around him. A man so strange, so alienated, that he could only see the world as a machine designed to crush the individual. It's a compelling image. It sells posters. It's also mostly wrong. Franz Kafka was an insurance lawyer. For 14 years, he worked at the Workers' Accident Insurance Institute in Prague. His job was to assess workplace injuries, calculate compensation, inspect factories. His co-workers found him charming, reliable, competent. His bosses promoted him. He was, by all accounts, good at paperwork. The writing happened at night, after work, after dinner with his parents, after the world had gone quiet and he could finally sit alone with whatever was growing inside him. He called it a double life, and he believed it was killing him long before the tuberculosis arrived. To understand Kafka, you have to start with his father. Hermann Kafka was a self-made man. Born poor in a village in Bohemia, he built himself into a successful businessman in Prague. He was large, loud, confident. He had opinions about everything and saw no reason to keep them to himself. His son Franz was everything he wasn't. Thin, sensitive, uncertain. A reader instead of a doer. A writer instead of a businessman. A man who couldn't seem to get married, couldn't seem to leave home, couldn't seem to become anything his father could recognize as success. In 1919, at the age of 36, Franz sat down to write his father a letter. It took him 2 weeks. It ran to 47 pages. It remains one of the most devastating documents of father-son conflict ever written. It begins, "Dearest Father, you asked me recently why I maintain that I am afraid of you. As usual, I was unable to think of any answer to your question, partly for the very reason that I am afraid of you." For 47 pages, he catalogues the damage, the constant criticism, the dismissal of everything that mattered to him, the way his father's voice had colonized his own mind, turning every thought into an argument he was already losing. And then he did something very Kafka. He gave the letter to his mother to deliver. She read it. She decided her husband couldn't handle it. She gave it back to Franz. Hermann Kafka never saw a word. 47 pages. Everything he needed to say, never delivered. The confession that explained everything, read by everyone except the person it was written for. If you know one thing about Franz Kafka, it's probably a sentence. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a monstrous vermin. The Metamorphosis, published in 1915, the story of a traveling salesman who wakes up as an insect and watches his family slowly abandon him. Here's what most interpretations miss. Kafka never explains the transformation. He's not interested in how it happened. He's interested in what happens next. And what happens next is that Gregor's family, after the initial shock, begins to thrive. The father, who had grown old and useless, finds new purpose. The sister, who had been invisible, becomes essential. The mother, who had been fragile, discovers strength. Gregor's catastrophe is his family's liberation. The worse things get for him, the better things get for them. By the end, when Hao finally dies, from neglect, from a wound his father gave him, from simply giving up, his family goes for a walk in the sunshine. They feel relieved. They start making plans. Kafka wrote this story in his childhood bedroom, in his parents' apartment. At night, after work, while his family slept on the other side of the wall. He later admitted in a letter, "My writing was all about you." He was talking to his father. And maybe that's why Kafka endures. Not because his stories are strange, but because they're familiar in a way that's hard to admit. We've all woken up feeling like something else entirely. Not the person we were yesterday, not the person anyone expects us to be. Something has shifted overnight, and now we have to pretend nothing has changed. We've all felt trapped in systems we didn't design. Forms that make no sense, procedures that serve no one, authorities that can't be questioned because no one knows who they are or what they want. Kafka didn't invent the nightmare. He just described it so precisely that we finally had a word for it. Kafkaesque. The specific texture of modern helplessness. The comedy that isn't funny. The trap that isn't visible until you're inside it. When Kafka died in 1924, his best friend Max Brod was left with a dilemma. Kafka had left explicit instructions. Burn everything. The unfinished novels, the notebooks, the letters. All of it. He wanted to disappear. Brod refused. He told Kafka, while Kafka was still alive, that he wouldn't do it. He spent the rest of his life editing and publishing Kafka's work. The Trial, The Castle, America. Everything the world knows of Kafka exists because his friend betrayed his final wish. Was it a betrayal, or was it a rescue? Kafka was a lawyer. He knew how to write binding documents. He gave his most important instructions to a man he knew would disobey them. But here is what the literary histories often leave out. In 1939, when the Nazis entered Prague, Brod escaped on one of the last trains. He carried Kafka's manuscripts in a suitcase. Kafka's three sisters did not escape. Ellie and Vali were deported to the Lodz ghetto, then murdered at Helmno. Ottler was sent to Theresienstadt, where she worked in a children's home. In 1943, she volunteered to accompany a transport of Polish Jewish children to Auschwitz. She walked into the gas chamber with them. Kafka had written about faceless bureaucracies that destroy individuals without explanation. About trials where the crime is never named. About systems designed to process human beings into nothing. He died in 1924. He never saw what came next. In his final months, Kafka was editing a story called A Hunger Artist. It's about a man whose art is starvation. He sits in a cage and refuses to eat while crowds watch. Eventually, the crowds lose interest. He's forgotten, still starving, in a corner of a circus. Kafka was editing this story while dying of tuberculosis of the larynx. His throat had closed. He couldn't eat. He was, quite literally, starving to death while writing about a man who chose to starve. At the end of the story, the hunger artist is asked why he fasted. His answer? Because I could never find the food I liked. If I had found it, believe me, I would have made no fuss and stuffed myself like you or anyone else. He wasn't showing off. He wasn't seeking attention. He simply couldn't find what would have nourished him. The fasting wasn't discipline. It was deprivation disguised as choice. How does a man who wanted to disappear become impossible to forget? Maybe because he described what we can't admit we feel. The sense that we're playing roles in a system we don't understand. The suspicion that our lives are being decided somewhere else, by someone else, according to rules we'll never see. He asked to be burned. He became eternal instead. That might be the most Kafkaesque thing of all.